Welcome to the Dork side of the internet. I'm your heinous host, Mr. Dork. And this week of Are You Afraid of the Dork? It's Season 2, Episode 5, Nervous Tick. A tragic little tale about the side effects of smoking at an early age. Or, perhaps on the ethics of bringing your bicycle inside an elevator? Okay, look, I'm gonna level with you here. I lost the plot synopsis to this one, and I don't really know how to best summarize it. So we're all going in a little blind here. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever the hell this one's about, knowing my dark and twisted mind, I'm sure it'll be positively spine-chilling stuff. So girdle your loins and oil your pig, because it's showtime, baby. Ha-cha-cha.
Nervous Tick. It was a typically fog-laden evening on Baker Street, when Sherlock Holmes, with his usual air of intrigue, summoned me to our shared lodging. Little did I know that this seemingly ordinary night would plunge me into the depths of yet another perplexing mystery, a tale woven with threads of deduction and enigma. To my characteristic amazement, Holmes was not in his study upon my entry into our shared abode. I searched high and low for him, until at last coming upon a clue. In Holmes' conspicuous absence, a cryptic letter was found on our cluttered study table, the script unmistakably his own. In it, he elucidated that urgent business had called him to the mysterious depths of India, leaving me to navigate the shadowy corridors of intrigue alone. The missive directed my steps to a new location, where malevolent crime had recently unfolded. With a note of expectation, Holmes entrusted me with the task of unraveling the puzzle and extracting justice from the fog of uncertainty that hung over a certain crime scene. The gravity of the situation struck me at once as I prepared to embark on a solitary journey into the heart of an unsolved mystery. But in lieu of Holmes, who, or perhaps even whom, had summoned me? As I pondered the identity of the mysterious summoner, the door swung open, revealing the unmistakable silhouette of Inspector Gregson from Scotland Yard. His brusque demeanor softened only slightly, as he slightly sheepishly explained that it was at Holmes' behest that he had summoned me. To my utter astonishment, Gregson, a stalwart ally in many a perplexing case, divulged that Holmes found himself embroiled in a predicament both sinister and salacious, a curious and convoluted caper which would no doubt reveal itself in good time, leaving me to carry the mantle of deduction in this lesser caper in Holmes' absence. "I've my doubts about whether you'll unravel this one, Doctor," Gregson remarked with a skeptical arch in his brow. I waited for further words of encouragement, except none ever came. Never much wonder beat around the bush, the curt yet duty-bound Gregson proceeded to escort me through the dimly lit streets to the crime scene, where the cold tendrils of mystery awaited my tentative exploration. Some 20 minutes later, having freshly arrived on the scene, I could sense Gregson was just about to set me loose. Before I departed, however, Gregson eyed me with a skeptical arch of his brow, always with the arching of the brows, lingering doubt etched across his features, as if unconvinced that my modest capabilities could measure up to the indomitable intellect of the absent Mr. Holmes.
"Good luck, Dr. Watson,"
Gregson gruffly uttered, though in his voice I couldn't quite make out whether I was hearing reluctant encouragement or a tinge of still more derision as we approached the ominous threshold of the crime scene.
The audit's drawn its conclusions, Doctor, but we'll indulge Mr. Holmes' peculiar request, Gregson mumbled, casting a frosty glance my way. Meet James Whitson, our man on standby. If by some miracle you manage to piece together more than we have, he'll be at your disposal.
With that, he gestured toward a figure standing discreetly in the shadows, ready to assist or observe as circumstances dictated. Gregson nodded, excusing himself. Turning to Whitson, I extended a handshake. "Watson, pleasure to meet you." Whitson seemingly reciprocated, with a nod and a mischievous glint in his eyes, then hit me with a, "Whitson, pleasure to meet you," in a curiously nasal tone, almost as though he was mocking me. Narrowing my eyes, Whitson narrowed his in turn. Excusing myself from further interaction with the bloke, I redirected my energies to the crime scene. The dim light of the gas lamps flickered in the crime scene room, casting eerie shadows on the worn wallpaper, the pervasive sense of aged wood, the deodorant of Victorian times, lingering despair and mildew all hung in the air. The victim, a middle-aged man named Reginald Barnes, lay sprawled on the threadbare carpet, his life seemingly extinguished by a single precise wound, the egg beater sticking prominently out of his chest. It seemed as instantly lethal a weapon as one could very well imagine, and yet even still, the room bore pronounced marks of a struggle. Furniture displaced, papers scattered, and an overturned vase, or vase if you're American, leaking its contents onto the floor. Did he really die right away, or might the wound have taken a few minutes to take? Surveying the scene further, my aspirationally analytical mind was already working furiously to piece together the puzzle in imitation of the characteristically meticulous manner of my mentor. As I began my examination, James Whitson, the man with an uncanny resemblance to myself, shadowed my every move, parroting my words and actions with irritating precision. My patience waned as Whitson persisted, exasperating the already tense atmosphere of the crime scene. At last I spotted what I believed to be a clue, upon which occasion I habitually cried out as I had many a time before with Holmes, "By Jove, the plot thickens!" Whitson, seemingly unable to resist the impulse to mimic, chimed in with a cheeky, By Jove, much like your wife, the plot thickens," causing me to all but entirely lose my train of thought in response to the unexpected and uncalled for bob. Letting out a heavy sigh, irritation plainly etched itself onto my features for all to see. Meanwhile, a disheveled man with wild feather-ribbon hair, who I could only assume was the police witness, nervously approached me. "I saw it, I did," the witness exclaimed. "A man in a chicken suit, he was. At the scene like a clucking phantom, he did." I raised an eyebrow, exchanging a bemused glance with Whitson, but instead of affirming my view of the absurdity of the situation, he only stuck his tongue out at me. Sensing a drop of disbelief as a shark smells blood, the witness fidgeted uncomfortably before breaking out into what could only be described as the unfortunate love child between a grimace and a smack. "I swear it's true, sir. Cross my heart and hope to fry." Upon completion of his sentence, the witness proceeded to jut his right arm into a not-so-terribly straight manner in the air 5 times, as though he were imitating the stabbing of an invisible victim, before rigidly coming to a stop, abruptly turning his head to see if I'd noticed, and then, suspiciously, reverting back to a more relaxed position. The witness's unusual demeanor raised my suspicions. But, as I had learned many a time from Holmes himself, who could honestly tell what was the truth at these early stages? Perhaps the man's body was only in such an excitable state because he cared so much about the suffragette movement, or had allergies, or I don't really know this guy, so I don't know. Anyway, weighing my options, I supposed it certainly wouldn't hurt to hear him out with an open mind. The man introduced himself as Professor Vaudeville von Vainglory, a man of
Uniquely delicious talents and taste.
It was an odd name and self-description, but then this was an odd man, and so I did my best not to let his eccentricities bias my judgment too pointedly against him as I listened intently to his following testimony.
I happened upon the crime scene quite by chance, he began.
There seemed at sentence start almost a carefully crafted air of nonchalance about his words, but this effect was immediately undercut by another series of most marvelous movements of his hand and arm jutting and slicing through air as a knife cuts through butter.
There, in window over yonder, I observed a suspicious man in a chicken suit, presumably the assailant, sprinting away from the unfortunate Mr. Barnes as clear as day.
Gazing through the fogged-over window, I cocked an eyebrow and stroked my chin, prompting Whitson to begin doing the same, followed by a distractible, obnoxious, and vaguely culturally insensitive little jig. With a grunt of slight approval, Vainglory continued.
The assailant promptly fled, leaving behind the scene of disarray you see before you, but not before bellowing out what I have come to believe was an ultimately incriminating utterance. Guilty, guilty, guilty is the one who is me. Oh, just as there are ones who burgle, burglars, if you will, there are ones who murder, burglars, if you will, and a burglar with a knife is me. I promptly alerted the authorities, and here we are.
Whitson, still echoing my movements, maintained an attentive facade as I completely organically progressed from stroking my well-maintained beard to my prominent and equally well-maintained Adam's apple. Absent the ingenious insights of Holmes, it was truly a most viciously vexing of cases, if ever there was one. Like a python choking on a garter snake, choking on a tapeworm, choking on an earthworm, there seemed to be far more to this case than first met the eye. My first impression of the witness, Mr. Vainglory, was that he was suspicious, and so he was probably involved with the crime in some capacity. But now, the witness testimony was indicating that he was actually innocent all along. And what was more, this bloke in the chicken suit was in all likelihood the real culprit. Turning to the egg beater, and then the professor, and then the egg beater again, followed by the professor, and then the egg beater, and then the professor once more, naturally followed by the egg beater, and then the professor, and lastly, the egg beater once more. My own brain, like the dimmest of perspirations upon a French bulldog's snout, began at once to make itself known to me. To my unadulterated amazement, it appeared to contain thoughts, more than one, in fact, much like in the style of the great detective. By Jove, I then thought, all our time spent together, he was rubbing off on me. Why, I can practically feel the steam coming out of my ears. But against all odds, I, Dr. John Watson of all people, am thinking now. Good heavens! An egg beater is not a knife, I exclaimed in astonishment, my disbelief clear to all. In my attempt to reconcile at most baffling of incongruous realities, I kept muttering a reiteration of this most intriguing of discoveries to myself again and again under my breath. Remarkable as it may sound, an egg beater and a knife are distinctly different tools for distinctly different purposes. Yet, as the realization lingered, my astonishment in it only rose, until, like an open pie put in an oven too long, or perhaps an astoundingly burly woman squeezing a cucumber until the sticky, oozing juices of inside couldn't help but to get themselves all over her hands. My insides had the properties of that which could not be contained forever. Yes, upon marinating upon them to the fullest of my admittedly meagre abilities, I couldn't help but exclaim for all the world to hear, "Egg beaters and knives, my dear fellow, are unequivocally, undoubtedly, disparate entities. An epiphany that, like the good detective's taste in women, transcends culinary comprehension." With bated breath, I glared at simultaneously everyone and no one in particular. Erupting into a nervous cough, Professor Vainglory excused himself to the corner of the room, babbling something about the need to retrieve his reading glasses to put the matter to bed. It was only in hindsight that I realized he had retrieved the glasses from the very room where the life of Mr. Barnes had been extinguished, the very room in which we all were at the time. They say the word cunning kind of rhymes with pudding, and pudding is not a very intelligent-seeming food, but in my experience the cunning are far sharper than a cup of pudding is clever, and that's an original John Watson-style truism that you can take to the bank. Upon his return, Vainglory, adjusting his glasses with a level of unease which was almost lost on me, had out a profound concession. "Indeed, Dr. Watson. That is an egg beater." So pleased was I with my successful deduction that tears began to well in my eyes as Vainglory ominously glared at the victim, taking special care to clench his fist 3 times, a display of agitation seemingly at odds with his self-professed exonerating account given only minutes prior. Lesser men would not have noticed, but I, ever the student of Holmes, was a far more observant and nuanced thinker than most, and so, as consequence, it was just as quickly as I had begun to suspect him that my brilliant by association mind absolved Professor Vaudeville von Vainglory of what modicum of suspicion I'd cast upon him almost as quickly as it was aroused through the following chain of impeccable reasoning. 1. The professor was a man of notable eccentricities which were frequently made manifest through physical tics. 2. Just recently, in response to me positively identifying what he claimed in his story was a knife, actually being an egg beater, the professor seemed to clench and unclench his fist 3 times, almost as though this insight disturbed him in some capacity. 3. As everyone knew, 3 was a perfect number, for it was the number of the Christian Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, 3 of the greatest goods which could be said to exist in all the universe. And 4. Therefore, in clutching and unclutching his fist, not 4, not 2, but 3 whole times, the good professor was subconsciously and unambiguously signaling his alignment with the forces of good, and thereby, to me, that he was a fundamentally good person who could still very much be trusted. With a sparkle in my eyes and a self-satisfied smirk on my face, I transmitted this entire impressive chain of reasoning to Whitson through a series of Morse code-adjacent blinks, taking special care to mouth the words I misspelled as I did so, just as I imagined Holmes would have done if he were in my place. It was one of the most thrilling chains of logic I had ever had the privilege of experiencing. And yet, even against the backdrop of this most aspiringly triumphant of circumstances, Woodson, ever unimpressed, only responded with still more mockery. Truly a hopeless case, if ever there was one. I didn't want to say anything to his face, but I half suspect he was daffy. But Whitson's most profane and professional instincts aside, in the wake of revelation I was posed with a most perplexing new predicament. If not the good professor, then who had really murdered Reginald? Instantly my mind turned back to those enigmatic words from the alleged chicken-suit-clad assailant. Guilty, guilty, guilty is the one who was me. Oh, just as there are ones who burgle. Burglars, if you will. There are ones who murder. Murglars, if you will. And a murgler with a knife is me. Was there some kind of clue to them? Some hitherto undiscovered method to their stark raving madness? The one who was me? Murglars? By Jove, what did it all mean? I must have scrunched my face up 72 different ways until I had just about scrunched it out, and with nothing to show for it. Till at last, it hit me, a brilliant Holmesian-style deduction that was sure to make my old friend proud now. G-U-I-L-T-Y? Why, these were letters, and one's I, a doctor, recognized at that. With obvious relief, I began to excitedly pace about the crime scene, much as I had seen my most mysterious mystery-solving job to do so many a time before, just prior to cracking a case wide open. "I have it!" I suddenly cried aloud with perhaps a bit too much enthusiasm, for upon this remark I'd be remiss not to mention the fact that the good Professor Vaudeville von Vainglory jumped up in surprise so high that he bumped the top of his head on the ceiling and doubled over in pain. The game was really afoot at this point, and from what I recall believing at the time, nearly drawing to a close. For so potent of a catalyst was the good professor's latest excitable reaction that I felt I would be remiss to not blurt out my conclusion right at that moment. And so, within the same breath as the thought occurred to me, as I did for all my thoughts, I proclaimed, "The truth has become perfectly clear to me now." Pointing excitedly to the professor, I continued, "You and Whitson have been carrying on an illicit affair for the past 6 weeks, and the proof is in the fact that you both have been using letters to communicate with each other since the moment I arrived at the scene." I paused, beaming brilliantly like the absolute 4-horsepower carriage of a brainiac I felt myself to be in that moment. But it would seem the intricacy of my deduction was a bit too much for either Whitson or Vainglory to process all at once, and so, as an unfortunate consequence, I was never afforded the congratulatory clamour which my brilliant deduction warranted. And then, as if that wasn't upsetting enough, in a moment of unanticipated candor, Professor Vainglory, unable to bear the mounting pressure, I suppose, perhaps from being late to some dentist appointment or date with a lady friend or whatever, blurted out, and I quote,
"Oh, blast it all! I can't take this anymore! It was me! I did it! I am the one who did it, okay? I committed the crime, you absolute dunce! You frickin' wanker! It was me! You hear me?"
The man seemed inexplicably exasperated by something, which I can only in retrospect place, although I imagine if Holmes had been there to explain things to me, I would have pieced them together much more quickly. I think it was out of a displaced anger against the medical establishment that Vainglory did direct his incoherent rabblings against me. It's the only thing I can think of that really makes any sense in light of all the evidence. For I can't, in all honesty, imagine any other reason for one to raise their voice against such a well-respected doctor as I, and such a civilized society as our great Victorian one, in the time and place in which this murder took place. But ever the patient man, all potential patients to be, I listened to Vaudeville von Vainglory's spiel, periodically stroking my chin as he rambled so as to convey a greater impression of listening.
"You're utterly hopeless! A bumbling fool with the deductive prowess of a toddler!
vainglory seethed, frustration etched into every word. A confession of sorts seemed to hang in the air. At the time, I was still much perturbed, as I felt there seemed more important matters to attend to beyond the ramblings of an incoherent man. If nothing else, here was a clear-cut example of a soul with anal retentive Freudian tendencies, as one could very well hope to find in my practice. And I inwardly noted this to myself, as the witness continued on his warpath.
Don't you get it? Don't you have any mind at all? It was me! Why do you still bear the look of someone completely without understanding?
A half-convincing argument, if not for one thing. The glaring omission of a chicken suit, the most telltale indicator of culpability in this entire case. Chuckling and shaking my head as though reprimanding my own child, I put my hand on Vainglory's shoulder, gave it a squeeze, and instructed him to calm down, as I did for all of my most difficult, typically feminine, clients. And yet the man's petulant mood lingered, like a father's least favorite child at his birthday party. Unable to contain his inexplicable disdain for me, Vainglory mustered one final jab, which I'm afraid to inform you, dear readers, was regrettably too beyond the pale even to recount here. But be assured that it was as hurtful as it was untrue. So around here, in the conversation, I just decided to try to tune him out. Truth to be told, there wasn't much which could be done about a witness who just didn't want to cooperate, absent of Mr. Holmes' disarming charisma, so I considered the man as good as a moot point. So at this point, in which Whitson, with an air of condescension, patiently attempted to explain something to me.
Dr. Watson, to borrow a phrase, it's quite elementary. I can take it from here.
Perplexed, I furrowed my brow. Whitson sighed, shook his head, and merely reiterated his nonsense point.
Vainglory, that ham over there spouting inconsistencies to high heaven. He was the one who really committed the crime.
Now more than a little perturbed by Whitson as well, I responded with a hesitant nod, hoping that my tepid show of support would quiet him up. Recalled say something like, yes, of course. Suppose it's time to go home, then. Seemed to do the trick. Just as I turned to leave, the corpse of Reginald Barnes emitted a peculiar sneeze. Unfazed, I instinctively uttered a "bless you," but I suppose in the moment I failed to recognize any real peculiarity. On my way out the door, I caught a glimpse of Whitson shaking his head in disbelief, something which I can only guess at, before making a modest show of cuffing Vainglory. 2 weeks later, to my profound astonishment, I was greeted by none other than Reginald Barnes, the very man I believed to be a corpse. With a subdued expression, but perhaps a hint of mischief in his eyes, Reginald revealed a shocking truth. The entire case was an elaborate setup orchestrated by the one and only Sherlock Holmes. It was a test, a meticulous examination of my mental fitness, both as an investigative partner and a presently licensed and currently practicing doctor. Well, my heart dropped for a moment, but only for a moment, because, come what may, it was obvious that Holmes had had faith in me, and when a man as extraordinary as that believes in you, one seldom has much to worry about. In all likelihood, I passed Holmes' test with flying colors. I still cling to that, I do. And yet, as the days have passed, I must confess that I have been met with a mounting sense of dread about the whole matter, and as consequence I have taken it upon myself to pen this account for consideration in a court of law, to be read before a judge as testament to my mental acuity, should it, God forbid, ever come to that. Of course, in all likelihood, our correspondence to come, and this attached first-hand accounting of matters shall prove themselves most unnecessary, but then again, never hurts to prepare. With that, I hope this letter finds you well, supposing, of course, I decide to send it. Sincerely, Dr. John Watson. The end.
Oh, so that's what that one was about. I should have known. Title was a dead giveaway. Well, anywho, this was your heinous host, kingmaker of cankersores, and queenmaker of whatever queens are most known to make. Perhaps pies or something, reminding you to strive to make a positive difference in someone's life every single day, even if that person is you. Signing off. Thanks for tuning in, and knock on whatever the homes are made of here in the Shadow Realm where I live. Be seeing ya real soon.